All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Kansas 3rd Congressional District Democratic Primary Candidate Forum. Are you ready to get Kevin Yoder out of office? Great, thank you. I'm Cynthia Yin, and I'm on the steering committee for Swing Left KS03. And thanks to everyone for being here, and hello to our Facebook live video viewers. And Swing Left is thrilled to co-host this forum with our young Wyandotte County leaders, the KCK-CC Student Senate, and the Wyandotte County Young Democrats. Will members of these groups please wave? Thank you. We also want to thank the Kansas City, Kansas Community College for allowing us to present this event. And I'll remind everyone that the views expressed during this forum are the opinions of the participants and not the college. I'd like to recognize and thank our participating partners. We've got the Wyandotte County Democratic Party, the Kansas Democratic Party 3rd Congressional District, Move On, March Forward KC, True Blue Women, GKC WPC, the Wyandotte County Political Action Group. We've got Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, the Delta Eta Sigma Chapter, and the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, the Alpha Epsilon Zeta Chapter from KCK. And now I'm going to introduce our two moderators, very distinguished residents of Wyandotte County. First is Crystal Watson. She's Deputy Chief of Staff of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. She's also President of the Heartland Black Chamber of Commerce. She's on the Board of Directors of the U.S. Black Chambers and is a former elected official of the Board of Education of the Kansas City, Kansas USD 500. Thank you very much, Crystal. Our second moderator is Gary Enrique Bradley Lopez. He's president of the KCK-CC Student Senate, president of the KCK-CC College STEMs, the vice chair and co-founder of the Wyandotte County Young Democrats, second vice chair of Kansas Young Democrats, Swing Left College Fellow, and the DCCC Field Organizer Fellow. It's been a great pleasure to get to know and work with Gary over the past year, and I thank you so much for your help and leadership in organizing this forum. I do want to point out that neither I nor the moderators have taken any position in the primary. We have not supported or endorsed any of these candidates. So now I'll turn it over to Crystal and Gary.
First up, with 2 minutes to introduce themselves, is Sharice Davids.
Hello. Okay, can everyone hear me? All right, great. So Kevin Yoder's never lost a congressional race, but Kevin Yoder's never had to face a candidate like me. I'm Sharice Davids, and I'm here to be your next representative and to help change the face of Kansas politics. So when we look at what typical Congress people look like, I for sure don't look like your typical congressman, and that's because your typical congressman doesn't look like America. Frankly, Congress is comprised of primarily a homogenous group of men, mostly white, mostly wealthy, and they almost all come from similar backgrounds of privilege and access. And America is so much more than that. The 3rd District is so much more than that. I'm not here to be anybody's voice. Women, working families, minorities, they all already have their own voices. I'm here because I want to help amplify and to listen. Because when we're in Congress, when I'm in Congress creating legislation, it's important that everyone's voice and thoughts and experiences are included in our policies and our legislation. And everyone should have a seat at the table. As a Native American woman who was raised by a single mother who served in the Army, I definitely had some odds stacked against me. I had to work really hard to go from Johnson County Community College, shout out to Community College, to Cornell for law school. I've worked at one of the country's largest corporate law firms. I've served in the highest levels of our federal government as a White House fellow, And now, I'm ready to work for you and to serve our district in Washington, D.C.
Brent Welder.
Good evening, Democrats. I am a labor lawyer, a father, a husband, and spent my entire career as a grassroots organizer and labor lawyer representing union workers. And I'm the only candidate in this race that has spent my entire career, every single job I've ever held, serving the underserved, serving the voiceless. And that's why I want to go to Congress. But, you know, I really don't want to spend this opening talking about myself. I want to spend it talking about the people that I want to help and the problems that we're facing. We live in an absolutely rigged economy. This country, this economy is being controlled by a handful of billionaires and giant corporations that do not care about you one bit. What they care about is their profit margin ticking up 0.1% at the end of each quarter. And the way that they achieve that is by victimizing women, ethnic and racial minorities, working class people, and poor people. And then they take a small percentage of that profit and they bribe politicians in Washington of all political stripes to keep that system going. The only way these Republicans stay in office is by taking completely insane positions and then making a strong case for it. They are strong and wrong. But the way to beat strong and wrong is with strong and right. I am making a strong case for important policies like Medicare for all, for every single woman, man, and child in America, $15 minimum wage. I hope you will go to brentwelder.com to join 10,000 people that have already donated to our campaign, volunteered to our campaign, and find out about my candidacy. Thank you.
Mike McCamon.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Mike McCamon, and I am running for U.S. Congress. Just a quick bio about me. My wife and I, I'm a fifth-generation Kansan. I've spent the better part of the last 30 years raising our family here in Overland Park. Well, actually, not here in Overland Park, but in the 3rd District in Overland Park. I'm a career technology and nonprofit executive, best known for making Bluetooth a success, a consumer success. If you have Bluetooth in your pocket, I helped make that happen when I left Intel to go do that in 2002. I also helped launch water.org, Matt Damon's nonprofit that helps people get safe water and sanitation around the world. Personally, I was raised in a single parent family by my mother. My father passed away when I was quite young. We moved to South Wichita, very much like this part of town in terms of working class families. I'm married, I'm a KU grad and father of 3. My wife is here. She is a KU Edwards accountant and a recent breast cancer survivor. One of the reasons why I'm in the race, by the way. My 2 adult boys, one of them's a software engineer, he's here in town and is here tonight. My middle is a Peace Corps volunteer serving as a teacher in Rwanda. And my daughter is still in high school and she goes to school in Olathe. I'm running because of the fact that I don't want Kevin Yoder to be our representative, and I think that I'm a good alternate choice to that. I'm very much a progressive moderate. I do lean very left, but I also understand that we need to have fiscal policies that we can actually accomplish as well. And so I'll be looking forward to the rest of the panel tonight.
Tom Niermann.
Thank you. My name is Tom Niermann, and I grew up in Kansas. This is my home. I'm raising my family here. And 26 years ago, I committed myself to a career of service to my community as a teacher. And I am running for office because early in my teaching career, I had students of mine shot and killed. I had a gun brought into my classroom, and nothing has changed since that time. I'm running for office because before the Affordable Care Act came along, my wife was deemed uninsurable due to pre-existing conditions, and the Affordable Care Act is under assault. I am running for office because every year I have conversations with my students and they tell me how concerned they are about the problems that our world faces and the politicians who know about these problems but do nothing to solve those problems. And I'm running for office because as a teacher, married to a teacher, I know what it's like to work paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to struggle as a middle-class family, and I am running for office because every election cycle, we send professional politicians, we send bankers, lawyers, executives to Congress, and the middle class gets left behind. I am running for Congress because it is about time that someone from the middle class represented the middle class, and I can guarantee you that if you elect me to Congress, I will work tirelessly as I have as a teacher for the last 26 years in service to my community. I will work tirelessly in service to my community rather than in service to political ambitions or political party.
Sidie.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today. I know it's a little bit of a rainy trip, and I heard there were some car wrecks on the way here, but I'm glad to see you all made it. I'm Sidie, and I'm here today to ask you for your vote on August 7th, because I want to be your next representative in Congress. And when I ran in 2016, I learned a few things. Somebody came up to me at an event and said, "What makes you think you could be a good congressperson?" And I thought that was a great question. And I went home and I thought about it, and what I like to do when I'm at events like this is I put myself in your shoes and go, what would I want to hear from a person like that? And so I thought about it and I go, well, I think what makes a good congressperson is life experiences. And if you look at the gray hair I've got here, I'm the oldest guy on stage. So I probably had more life experience than everybody up here, but I may be old, but I got low miles. So I think I can hang on and do a good job for you if you send me to Washington. But you know, I started out my life working in high school in the summertime as a road construction guy. So I'm out there on 100-degree days laying asphalt. And I remember when I got the job, I couldn't believe how much money I was making. And then after about a month on the job, I went, wow, I don't care how much money I'm making, I don't want to do this forever. And so that's when I decided to go to college. I went to college, I got a degree in economics, MBA in finance, went to work for a Fortune 500 corporation. I started as a trainee. Within 5 years, I was VP. So I've got a lot of experience. I started at ground level working as a blue-collar worker, gone all the way through corporate America. I know how they think. I know what they're doing wrong. I know the loopholes that we need to fix, and we can make America great again very easily with a few simple fixes to what's going on in Washington, and I want to be the person that goes there and makes it happen. Vote for me. Thanks a lot.
Sylvia Williams.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sylvia Williams, and I'm also a fifth-generation Kansan. Most recently, I spent 30 years in banking and finance. I actually became the first woman to ever reach top senior management in my field. And so I look at a lot of you women out there, I know how hard it is to succeed in a man's world. But after a lot of hard work, I got known as a leader and someone that really fights to get things done. So the reason I'm running, as a woman, but more importantly as a wife and a mother, I'm 52 years old now and I actually have a 7-year-old. I'm really angered at the possibility that we could be living in a world where Trump is our president, Chris Kobach could be our governor, and Yoder is our house rat. I mean, just think about that trifecta for a second. So, with the exception of Sidie, none of us have ever ran before. None of us have ever been vetted before. So, we already had one candidate in this race, I think a lot of you were following, that had to drop out because of a lawsuit no one knew about. So, I think it's time that we're all transparent. I'm not saying there's anything in everybody, but we can't afford an October surprise. Kevin Yoder is going to have millions of dollars to come after whoever comes through. We have to be transparent now. It's very important with what's on the line. This is why I did release a couple weeks ago, I don't know if everybody saw it, my last 3 years of Kansas income tax returns. I asked for everybody to do that as well. That's how we pay in Kansas for our schools and our teachers. Also, just to go on the record, I'm sorry, just to go on the record, I've never been in a lawsuit myself or arrested. I hope we could answer those questions. But more importantly, we need to send someone to Congress that's going to fight for health care for all, fight for better wages, and fight for jobs, and fight to preserve Social Security and Medicare. We have to have someone that can get through this general election
All right,
and
thank you.
withstand the attacks and win.
All right, thank you.
Before we get to the next set of questions, we do have some empty seats available. So if any of you would like that are standing, that would like to have a seat, we'll take this time to allow you to be seated. There's a seat here, there's 2 seats, 3 seats, few seats over here in this area. Okay. All right, the next set of questions, the candidates will have up to 90 seconds to answer the following. Our first one. According to the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, Wyandotte County has ranked last in health outcomes among all counties in the state of Kansas for the past 10 years. Wyandotte County sits next door to Johnson County, ranked first in the state, and one of the 25 healthiest counties in the country. Wyandotte County and Johnson County are both represented in the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Kansas, with Wyandotte County making up nearly 22% of this constituency. So candidates, what will you do to ensure that this 22% experiences equitable health improvements over the next 10 years? Again, what will you do to ensure that this 22% experiences equitable health improvements over the next 10 years? And then the second part of this question is, which will be a yes or no answer. What do you know of any healthcare programs addressing the issue of Wyandotte County being one of the healthiest counties in the state of Kansas? And if you were asked to name those programs, could you name them? And those are both yes or no questions. So, going back to the first. What will you do to ensure that this 22% experiences equitable health improvements over the next 10 years? Brent Welder.
I think most people know in this room that there's really only one way that we're going to ensure that every single woman, man, and child in America achieves quality health care. And that is with single-payer health care, Medicare for all, for every woman, man, and child. I would, for critics, Republicans, anybody who thinks that, we don't need universal single-payer health care for everyone, I would like to bring me the one child that person thinks does not deserve to be able to go to the doctor if she gets diseased. I'd like that person to bring me the one working mother who works her tail off every single day but doesn't get benefits and doesn't deserve to be able to get quality health care if she gets injured on the job. This is a moral and an economic imperative. People in this country are suffering. People do not have health care. People that have it have a system that's too expensive and too complicated. And the only way we are going to achieve this is to join every other industrialized nation in the entire world and provide universal coverage for every single person. It is half the cost of the current mess of a system we have now. It's the only thing that will help us save us economically and ensure quality health care for everyone. And that is the program that I'm aware of that will serve every single person, no matter how old or young they are, man, woman, or child.
So are you aware of any programs within Wyandotte County that addresses the issue? Yes or no?
But yes.
And if you were asked to name them, would you be able to name at least one of those programs?
Medicaid.
Okay, thank you. Next person, Mr. Mike McCamon.
Sure, thanks, Crystal. So my position would be that the best thing for us to do would be to continue down the path of making the Affordable Care Act a reality. I think all of us in this room believe it was a good first step, and there are things that are broken. The family gap is one issue that we need to address. We also need to look at the subsidies, and of course, we also need to look at the fact that state by state, we have limited choice. I'd like to see us, again, reinvest in the Affordable Care Act and make it a reality. I would also, by the way, want us to look to expand the idea that we'd have a single payer option, which would be Medicare, and that people would be able to buy into that service off an actuary table if they could, with subsidies, by the way, for folks that are in poverty. There are a couple of things I'd also want to mention that I've learned since I've been down here in Wyandotte. I mean, I think that it's one thing to talk about the plans, but we need to also remember that these programs must have clinics in neighborhoods with clinicians that speak the languages of those neighborhoods. I had the opportunity to visit the Shane Clinic, and some great work going on over there serving the Latino population here in Wyandotte. And I also think we need to also be thinking about in the clinics is having good hours of operation. A lot of the folks have working families and have to deal with daycare, and having a typical office hour situation doesn't work for all of our families. So I think there's some very small things we can do in this area, in addition to the Affordable Care Act, to begin to address these issues.
And are you aware of any programs
I
that?
just named two of them.
Okay, you didn't have to name them, just want to know if you were aware of them.
I am aware of them. I've been schooled very, very hard by a couple people who work.
Just
He's
yes
right
or
over there.
no,
Yeah,
just yes or no.
Yes, I've been schooled.
Thank you so much. Candidate Tom Niermann.
I'm familiar with the report that Robert Wood Johnson Foundation did, and one of the other critical pieces of information that's in that report is the realization that 50% of all health outcomes are determined by environmental factors. So when we take that into consideration, when we want to talk about a fight for equitable health, this means that the fight for affordable housing is a fight for health. It means a fight for quality education is a fight for health. It means that the fight for good paying jobs that support families is a fight for health. All of those things are part of what goes into equitable health care. And those are issues that I think we need to address specifically, in addition to making sure that there is universal health coverage for all Americans. Now, when it comes to health care coverage, I firmly believe that our immediate response is to make sure that we are shoring up the Affordable Care Act. And there are a couple of ways that we can make health care affordable for more of our working families. This is a particular emergency here in Wyandotte County, where we've got 30% of our families that owe medical bills have those bills in collections. And we can immediately begin, because there's bipartisan support for these programs, we can restore the cost sharing reductions that make copays affordable. We can also offer premiums or subsidies for premiums as well.
Okay, so the second part of the question, are you familiar with any programs for Wyandotte County?
Yes.
Okay, and if you were asked to name them, would you be able to name those programs?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sylvia Williams. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. J. Sidie,
Okay.
sorry.
One thing I want to mention is that you look at Wyandotte County and compare to Johnson County, there's one other thing that stands out. Wyandotte County is the unhealthiest county in Kansas. Johnson County is the healthiest county in Kansas. And you look at income. Johnson County has the highest income of any county in Kansas, and Wyandotte County has the lowest income. And that's what affects healthcare. So the first thing you have to look at when you're trying to fix healthcare, education, housing, gun violence, all the things that are going on here that we need to address, it all starts with economic viability. And so as a candidate, that's where I shine. I could come in and help figure out how we can restore the economy in Wyandotte County so all the other issues have resources that can be utilized. If you don't have resources, there's nothing you can do about the issues. And that's what I would try and focus on as a candidate. And I definitely want to see a healthcare system that is based on something called all-payer, because it's one that we can actually get accomplished. Single payer is nice, but there's too much resistance from the infrastructure that's already in place in the private sector. So if we want to get something that's reasonably close to single payer and accomplishes the same goals which lowers costs and spreads out the coverage to cover everybody. We can do it with a system called All Payer, and if anybody wants to talk to me about it, I'd be glad to meet you afterwards. Thank you.
And the second part of the questions, can you?
Yes, and yes.
Thank you. I'm asking these questions because you get to ask them what those programs are when we're done. Is that okay? All right. And you get to ask them one-on-one. All right. Sylvia Williams.
Hi. First of all, I want to say healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And with that, we definitely need to move to a single payer system. I do think we need to be realistic on what the time frame for that's going to be. We're running for a 2-year term. I do think we have challenges on trying to get single payer accomplished in the first 2 years. A couple of the things I think we have to address first to put guardrails in place is we've got to address the cost of prescription drugs, because if we expand Medicare in its current form, it's going to be challenging because of the cost of prescription drugs that are currently embedded in the program. Secondly, I think one thing I would like to see addressed, should I be elected, if you look within the Affordable Health Care Act, the self-insured plans are now over 80% of the health care plans that are out there. I think all employers, when we had the mandate, when it was in place, it was on the employee, it was not on the employer. I think we should put the mandate on the employer. If someone is working full-time at your place of employment, they should insure all their employees, and they should pick up the cost. So that might force employers to want to move, for the government to move to single payer and get them to buy in.
And the second part of the question?
Yes?
Are you, and the second?
Yes.
Thank you. Candidate Sharice Davids.
Hello. I'll wait until you get here.
I was trying to wait for you.
Oh,
Then I heard
you
the
could
beep.
tell candidate
Yeah.
Sharice.
Trying to give him a chance. You're doing a
I
great
get
job.
9 minutes. No, I'm okay.
Ready?
I'm ready. If you're ready, I'm ready. Okay. So this is actually funny. I accidentally brought all my notes up here. And I happen to have the heat report with me, which is the report that was referenced earlier. And the reason that I have the heat report is because although my office is in Wyandotte County, I lived in Wyandotte County for just 1 year, I recognize that I'm not from this community, and that the health disparities that exist are something that I can understand the statistics about, but in order for me to actually understand what this report means, I have to meet with people and understand what it is that they're experiencing. And so I think that's actually the first part of what we as people who want to be representatives have to do, is to learn from the community what are the needs that need to be addressed, and also to seek out what are the programs that we should be figuring out ways to support. And this is actually a prime example of that. And this will answer the questions later, but the Community Health Council of Wyandotte County is a place where I have spent some time because I've been trying to learn more. I think coming in and saying I have the answers for a community that I'm not part of is misguided, and it's part of how we got the system that we have now. And it's unacceptable when I'm trying to be part of changing that system.
Thank you. And I think you answered the question.
Yes and yes.
Thank you.
All right. The second question is, how do you feel about Black Lives Matter and what can be done about police brutality? And that question goes to Mike McCamon.
Well, that's a tough question. It's a really tough question. It's one of the things I've been trying to understand as I've started this campaign, is trying to meet with as many leaders in our community. I've met with 135 people, I think, as of today. And I've met with the mayor here in Kansas City, Kansas, obviously met with school districts. I haven't had a chief of police here, but I've met with 5 different chiefs of police. And I think that it's in the district, and I tell you, it's a really big challenge. I think that the movement of Black Lives Matter was necessary at its time, and I believe in the mission of what they're trying to accomplish and the message that we should all be hearing. I also, quite frankly, pray that we don't have a police shooting here in our district. That would just be the worst. I cannot even imagine if that were to happen again in the district. I hope that it doesn't happen anytime soon. I also pray that, when people, by the way, you talk to chiefs of police, one of the things they're having right now, the biggest problem they have is recruiting people, recruiting good police officers, because they know how dangerous their job is and how the dynamic in our neighborhoods are. And so I'll also say a prayer every night for that also when the police go into a situation, they be mindful of the fact that they take as much caution as possible in dealing with the citizens that live in this community. The police are the citizens and the citizens are the people. We're part of the solution.
Niermann?
The first part of the question, how do I feel about Black Lives Matter? I support the movement strongly. One of the questions I use when I teach class, I'm an American history teacher, I use the question, is America the land of opportunity, and if so, for whom? And the reason I like to use that question is because it forces my students to analyze that idea of opportunity through time and across different barriers that we use to define and divide the United States. And when we analyze American history according to that question, my students invariably come back with the conclusion that organizations like Black Lives Matter are important organizations that bring to the center of our attention important issues that have to be resolved. Now, I also think that when it comes to police brutality, one of the things that we have to do is focus on building relationships within communities. And again, as a teacher, this is an issue that I'm personally familiar with. We had, in the first school I worked at, uniformed, armed police officers that were part of our security force at school. And we knew that the best way to ensure that our community was safe, especially our community of students, is to build those relationships between police officers, authority figures within the neighborhood, and the people residing in those neighborhoods. Any attempt to try and resolve any of these issues without building those relationships will be a failed attempt.
Thank you. Sidie?
Okay, back to my talk about the economy. Because if you look at Black Lives Matter, it's a very important issue. I support the organization, but it's a result of a situation where we had poor economic conditions that led to crime, combined with too many guns in the hands of people in the United States. If you look at gun violence in the United States, it's so far and above any other place in the world, and it's all because we have too many guns on the street. The other problem is because of the tax situation, which is something I talk about on all the issues, because there's a lack of resources when it comes to hiring and training police officers. So a lot of problems we have with Black Lives Matter and other issues where the police have shown bad judgment is because they're not very qualified people that have been hired and they haven't been trained properly, and that's going to lead to the kind of outcomes that we're having. So again, it boils down to resources put in the right place to get the right results, and Black Lives Matter put a focus on what's going on and we need to fix it. So again, I believe getting guns off the street would be the first viable solution, and it would be a voluntary thing. You wouldn't force anybody to do anything, so you have a government buyback, just like they did in Australia. Get guns off the street, especially in low-income areas where there's guns probably laying around that they would probably love to get rid of and get the cash. And then that's one less gun that can end up being used in a situation, and with less guns, the police that are there to protect us would be less afraid. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Sylvia Williams?
Of course, I support Black Lives Matter, and I think freedom of speech is so important, especially in this day and age. The right to protest is also so important in this day and age. And also the bravery it actually takes to protest, to get your word out. I do think when it comes to police officers, we do need retraining, but I also think we need to look at the model on requiring officers to make sure they live in the communities that they serve. when they're part of the community, they understand the community better. And I think that that's just better for everyone involved. So I know in a lot of cities, and I'm actually not for sure in Kansas City, Kansas, you might be required to live in the city, but I actually think we need to make it more of a micro requirement and bring it down to the precinct level and make sure they're actually living in the exact community.
All right, Sharice Davids.
Well, first I'll just say Black Lives Matter. And then I think one of the problems that we have when we talk about police violence is that we often focus on individuals within a system that is rooted in violence. And until we address that, it won't, I don't think that having a requirement for police officers to be from a community or to build relationships with individuals is going to be the solution. I think that we need to take a step back and reevaluate the way that our police system has been set up, similar to our criminal justice system, and one feeds into the next. And when we see disproportionate amounts of violence against Black people, which is why we have Black Lives Matter, and why we need to just say it and not say that I think Black Lives Matter, I believe Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. And then I think that we need to be thinking about the ways that we perpetuate this system. And by putting the onus on individuals, we take the blame off of the system that has been created, that makes it possible for us to have so many deaths of civilians at the hands of police violence.
Brent Welder. You broke it.
We have an absolute crisis, an epidemic playing out every single day on the streets, in our communities, in our state, and in our country. And this is an epidemic of Black people, oftentimes unarmed young Black men, that are being arrested, brutalized, and yes, murdered when they are completely innocent and did absolutely nothing wrong. This needs to stop. Little measures here and there, tinkering at the edges, is not the way to solve this problem. We need fundamental change. Black Lives Matter. We need to end the private prison system that is encouraging racism in our justice system. We need to train police officers the way that other countries do about how to apprehend a suspect so that the cop is not trying to play judge, jury, and executioner at the time. We need community oversight boards that hold police accountable, criminally, civilly, when they break the law and when they exceed their constitutional authorities. I'm proud to be working on this issue with civil rights leader like Alvin Sykes, who supports my campaign, the former presidents of the NAACP here in Wyandotte County and Johnson County, and Dr. Cornell West, who has endorsed my campaign. And I'm working with people in the community, and I hope you will join me in this effort. Thank you.
All right, our next question. What policies do you support regarding immigration, border control, and DACA? What policies do you support regarding immigration, border control, and DACA? This question goes to first candidate Tom Niermann. Niermann.
It's all right. I firmly believe that immigration is this is part of our identity as America. We are a nation of immigrants, and the current policies that are under discussion, like building a wall, I think are policies that make no sense. I believe that we need to put in place policies that allow DACA kids to stay. We need to make sure that the policies that we have for immigration streamline the path to citizenship. And I think that it's important for all of us to remember that as a nation of immigrants, immigration policy is a policy that should welcome people to the United States. This is how the United States became the spectacular country that it is. And for us to deny immigration and to demonize immigrants is to demonize our own history. And I think that that is wrong, and I think those policies are misguided, and I think that everything that we can do to ensure a policy of immigration that welcomes the best and brightest from around the country is what would serve the United States best.
Thank you. Next, Jay Sidie.
I believe that we need a clean path to citizenship for the Dreamers. I mean, it's only right that the people that have grown up here most of their lives have the ability to stay here. Secondly, I want to see that HC1 visas reinstated because they provide a valuable resource to our communities and to our businesses here in the United States, and it's just not practical for that situation to change. I'm also a firm believer that immigration was the key to America's greatness, and it's going to be the key to our future. If you look at birth rates in America for the last 2 years, they're at record lows. We need immigration to fuel this economy so the rest of us have somebody coming behind us to keep the system rolling. And also the thing that I talk about too, as far as what's really causing all this immigration fear. You know, why are people so afraid of immigrants? If you look at the criminal history, there's nothing there. It's because corporate America is stealing resources away from the middle class due to outsourcing jobs offshore and technology, and they don't want to take the blame, so they're blaming immigrants. They're saying these immigrants are coming in here, they're taking your jobs, and you're taking your resources. So they're trying to deflect what's really going on in our economy and pushing the blame on somebody that has no fault at all. So I want to push that out there, that we shouldn't be afraid of immigration. We should be embracing it because it's key to our future.
Next candidate, Sylvia Williams.
Thank you. I think part of the whole debate on immigration is, I think we really need to focus, it's about building families. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about building families. We're putting families back together. So I think when we focus on that, I mean, of course I'm for a clean DACA bill. We also need a comprehensive immigration reform bill that leads to citizenship. When you look at our history, our immigration is where we've innovated things, we've built things. All of us are immigrants or come from somewhere, and we just really need to focus the policies on making sure that it's a policy where we're bringing families together, we're not tearing them apart, making sure that relatives have you have the ability to bring your relatives and bring families together. So I think we need a compassionate policy, and we need to address this in a more sensitive manner.
Thank you. Sharice Davids.
So I'm fully supportive of a clean DACA. I really would hope that we would be able to get, I mean, this is a failing of Congress already, is that we don't have a pathway to citizenship for the Dreamers. And then, in case anyone's wondering, around arrest records, I have been arrested. I participated in an act of civil disobedience in Washington, D.C. at the end of last year to help be a voice and exercise my privilege as a citizen that will never have to worry about my citizenship being revoked for a minor infraction. And so I was arrested standing in solidarity with folks who want to see a clean DREAM Act. We need to protect Dreamers. Also, comprehensive immigration reform. That has bipartisan support. I don't disagree with Jay that I think that there are probably a lot of corporate interests that are keeping that from happening. And then finally, we really need to make sure that we're not constantly disregarding the fact that Native Americans are still here and that there are a lot of people who are descended from people who were brought here against their will. And that is part of the complex history that we have in this country. We need to acknowledge it so that we can move forward and that we can build systems that embrace immigration and our complex history.
Thank you. Brent Welder.
The issue facing the Dreamers today was actually put on my radar long before Dreamers was actually a term out there. My wife was the Latino outreach director for this congressional district for the Democratic Party back when Congressman Dennis Moore and Kathleen Sebelius were elected and were putting a lot of effort into empowering the Latino community. And one of the things she did was she hired a team of young Latino students to go door to door and register voters and get voters to early vote in the Latino communities. And a 16-year-old young woman, girl, walked in and wanted a job and didn't know what a social security number was. And my wife had to be the first person that had ever told her in her life that because she was brought over when she was 1 year old, that she actually was not an American citizen and wouldn't be able to legally work. This girl grew up here, lived life here, worked, lived, played, went to school here, and is American as apple pie. And there's no reason that she is not an American. If Ronald Reagan can give amnesty to undocumented workers 30 years ago, we can give a similar pathway of citizenship today. Instead, we have a president that is ripping and tearing families apart, taking the children of undocumented workers and throwing them in facilities on military bases, and they may never see their parents again. In Congress, I will stop this and make sure it doesn't happen.
Microphone. He's ready.
I'm on. So a couple quick things I'll tell you that my career benefited from immigration. The two most successful companies I worked for were Apple and Intel, both co-founded by immigrants. I also have an immigrant in my family. My daughter was born in Cambodia, and we adopted her when she was 9 months old. Here's what I would tell you. The first thing I would do, obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff around, no border wall, all that kind of stuff, but here's a statistic to think about. We have what I would call a reign of terror in our immigrant communities in even our own city. Since Trump's been in office, he has deported over 140,000 people back to their home countries. That's almost as many people that live in Kansas City, Kansas. Many of them for minor violations, not hardened criminals. And in fact, the stories I hear are just remarkable. What I will say to you is that we need to end this reign of terror. It does no good. It tears families apart, it perpetuates hate, and it makes our communities less stable. It does nothing. So to quickly go through the vote, Dreamers should have amnesty. There should be a reform path to citizenship. We need to have a separate court system for minor violations and hardened criminals. And for God's sake, we do not need a border wall. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my whole life.
Thank you.
All right. Minimum wage is low, and many people in Wyandotte County can't live on those wages without having to work multiple jobs. What would you do to improve this situation? And we'll start with, where am I at? Jay Sidie.
Okay. We all deserve a livable wage in this country. We're the richest country in the world. The problem is the system's rigged, like people have talked about tonight. The average CEO in America makes 500 times what the average worker at that corporation makes. And you look at the taxes that are paid. If you go back, and I think that's one thing that's caused the big inequality in America, the tax burden has fallen down instead of up. In the 60s, you had a tax rate of 70% on people making huge sums of money. And the tax rate on low-income people was lower. So a lot more taxes was being collected for the people making $10 million a year. And that's gone when Ronald Reagan came in 1989. And that's when inequality in America went through the roof. If you look at a chart of inequality from 1900 to 1960, it was pretty flat. In 1987 or 1989, it took off like a rocket ship. And it's all due to the way our taxes are collected. But we do need livable wage, and I don't know if it's a minimum wage because I don't think it'd be fair for a person in New York City to get the same minimum wage as somebody living in Colby, Kansas. We need one that's indexed based on cost of living, so the people that live in the higher cost areas are getting a livable wage, because that's what I really want. Not a minimum, but a livable wage.
Sylvia Williams.
Jay just took my answer. No, I think we do have to tie the wages to the cost of living. Clearly in like Wyandotte and Johnson County, the minimum wage should be at least around $15 an hour. Now, in the more rural areas, I grew up in Parsons, Kansas, and you're lucky if you have one Dairy Queen in town, and so that might be a little bit steep for them. But whether it's a system where you can apply due to your cost of living, and you can maybe that city can actually get some sort of a lower approved minimum wage, that might be a way to do it. But I do think you have to tie it to the cost of living in the rural areas.
Right. Sharice Davids.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think we need a livable wage. When we think about in Wyandotte County, I could be mistaken, but it's in a household where there are 2 adults, each person would have to make close to $15 just to be able to cover basic expenses. And if you're by yourself, it's like $22. So I think one of the things that we often see is that we buy into slogans like fight for 15, and it's not that $15 wouldn't be, I just said, close to $15 an hour is what it takes for 2 adults in Wyandotte County. But what we need to be doing, and I'm glad someone already mentioned this, is the cost of living in some places is so high, and it's not just rural areas that we need to be worried about. It's also places where people are starting to get priced out. And if we don't somehow index the way that we compensate people to the cost of living, then we're going to be on the same cycle that we're on right now. Secondly, I think that we need to also make sure that we're including people who are part of the gig economy and people who don't fit into the classification that would get the $15 minimum wage. That needs to be part of this conversation as well, because there are a lot of people left out. When we say $15 minimum wage or a livable wage, we need to make sure that we're always talking about people who are covered or who are part of either the gig economy or wait staff, service industry. Like, there are so many people that are left out of that, and they need to be able to organize.
Brent Welder.
From the very first day that I've been running for this office, on my website, I have made it extremely clear that we need a $15 minimum wage. It's true, and it's been said. In Kansas, you need to make at least $15 minimum wage just to have the bare minimum, 2-bedroom apartment, a little bit of healthy food. 80% of the Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives have co-sponsored $15 minimum wage legislation. If we flip the House with Democrats, with the right Democrats that support it, then we have the ability to pass this key piece of legislation. Wouldn't it be a shame if all the effort, energy, work we put in to beat Kevin Yoder, and we ended up sending a Democrat to Congress that didn't have the courage to support this $15 minimum wage? It's extremely important. It's important for small businesses and companies because we need to build our communities economically. And when people are making more, they're able to spend more in their communities. And it's being taxed and it's being spent in our communities and building our infrastructure and spending our schools, being spent on our schools instead of being sent to overseas bank accounts where corporations dodge their taxes. I will co-sponsor the $15 minimum wage legislation, and I hope that every Democrat here will come to the point where they can say the same thing. It's extremely important.
Mike McCamon.
I was gonna ask, can you repeat the question, please? Can you spell the word? No, I'm sorry.
First,
It's like a spelling bee here. No, I kind of, was it only about minimum wage, or did it wander into economic development in Wyandotte County as well?
what would you do to improve that situation? I just want minimum wage.
I was like, what, it was only minimum wage?
It's only minimum wage.
Okay, well, what's
I
down
know you
minimum
want to
wage?
add more, but it's only.
I'll wander around, you can start the clock, I'm kind of trying to kill some time here, so. No, I would certainly support a livable wage. I've learned in my career that you do not get good results by legislating and telling companies what to do. You actually get better results by shaming them into doing the right thing, all right? So I know for a fact that if you work at the GM Fairfax plant, the minimum wage, I think the entry wage, maybe some folks that work there here in the audience, I think it's like 16 or whatever it is might be per hour. If you get a job over at the Amazon Center, just right down the street here, it's less than $11 an hour. So wage is part of it. But the other thing I'm hearing when I talk to people in Wyandotte, it's also about childcare, having access to childcare on site. It's also about transportation to be able to get to job. It's also about flex hours so that they can work around their child's school schedules. There's a whole bunch of things we can do to empower the people that are at the base of the pyramid, if you will, in terms of the economic ladder that can help make these things happen. I think we should get up and actually use the microphones that we have and tell folks, hey, we think that Company X is not paying enough for this part of town, and that might actually get you faster results than actually trying to get some law passed in Congress, in my humble opinion. The other thing I'll just mention real quickly at the very end, let's see here. Actually, there was one little bit of study I've been doing. I've been following what Warren Buffett suggests on this. And maybe another way to get out of this problem is to increase the earned income tax credit, or the ultimate minimum tax, as a way to basically provide people that are low-income earners to actually get money back from the government, as opposed to legislating a minimum wage.
Thank you, Mike. Tom Niermann. Turn it off on time.
Unintentional, I'm sure.
See if you're tweeting again. You've been tweeting the whole time.
One of the exercises I've done with my students over the years is to have my students research how much it costs to live, and we will research the cost of housing, we'll research the cost of food, clothing, utilities, all the things that are associated with living on your own. And then I have them do the math and figure out how many hours they need to work at a minimum wage job, and they realize immediately that the current minimum wage does not allow people to live lives independently. It is impossible. And then if you've got children on top of that, it's fantasy land to think that our current wages will allow working people to support families. So I think there is an immediate need to address how and what we pay our workers. And I would support a move toward a $15 minimum wage, but I think that the wages need to be tied to a prevailing wage that is connected to the cost of living index. Because I think it's foolish for us to deny the fact that it is much more expensive to live in New York City or San Francisco or Seattle than it is to live in other areas of our country. And we need to be cognizant of that fact. But we must address how much our workers are earning if we're serious about making sure that working families can support their families.
Thank you.
Our next question will start with candidate Sylvia Williams. And that question is this: what measures do you support to decrease gun violence? Should teachers be armed? Should specific weapons be banned? Again, what measures do you support to decrease gun violence? Should teachers be armed? Should specific weapons be banned?
Hello. This is such a personal question for me. Of course, teachers should not be armed. I have a daughter that's 7 years old and she's in first grade. I actually volunteer at her school, so I spend a lot of time at the school. I can't imagine with the burden, as Tom knows, that we already put on teachers, that having an arms race in the middle of the school is a solution of any type. I actually grew up in rural Kansas, so my dad hunted every weekend. But if one of his friends would have shown up with a military-style assault weapon, he would have called the county sheriff. I mean, that's how it was done in those days. So during my lifetime, we used to have a 10-year ban on military-style assault weapons, and I think we need to reinstate that. Obviously, I'm for universal background checks and waiting periods, and I also think we need to raise the age to buy weapons to 21.
Thank you. Sharice Davids.
So, I also support background checks, universal background checks. I think we need to close loopholes. You know, I've been talking about this as a public health issue, and I definitely think that we need to take a holistic approach, meaning we need to study the problem, we need to fund studies of gun violence. We also need to be thinking about who can get their hands on firearms, and reducing the likelihood that someone will either harm themselves or harm other people by, I think background checks is part of it, also red flags. So if someone has suicidal ideations, they're not able to get their hands on a firearm. And then also closing loopholes. So there are a number of ways to reduce the likelihood that someone would be able to get their hands on a firearm. And then actually, when we think about the hardware, so definitely, I think bump stocks, high capacity magazines, those are simple and that seems like common sense. Those are designed to skirt our ban on fully automatic weapons already. And then assault style weapons, I have absolutely no idea what purpose they serve. They're not for hunting, they're designed to hurt people. So that, and then we should pay teachers, not arm teachers. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Brent Welder.
I am the most proud father of a precious, amazing little 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter. And when I think back to the massacre that occurred in Newtown so many years ago, where somebody was able to obtain an assault weapon, go into a school, and kill these innocent, unbelievable children and take their entire future away, I was shocked and appalled and angered that our representatives in Congress did nothing. And the reason for that is because they are owned by the NRA, by the gun industry. Kevin Yoder is the worst. He's one of the top 10 recipients of money from the gun industry in the United States Congress. He's the top recipient from the NRA of the House members in the state of Kansas. I do not take money from the corporate gun industry or from any corporation for my campaign. I have made that pledge. I do not take money from the NRA. And last year, I called for reinstatement of the assault weapons ban and made headlines because I was the first federal candidate in the state of Kansas to do so. I'm so glad that my colleagues here and that other candidates around the country have joined me in this call. It is extremely important. We need to save our children, we need to protect them. And we need to make sure that our Washington politicians know that it's more important for a child to live their life than for somebody to obtain an assault weapon and go into a school.
Thank you, Brent. Mike McCamon.
Sure, thank you. So I've been on record before when someone asked me what should we do about gun violence, what measures should we take, and I have said, Congress, do anything. Do anything. Do anything. Since Las Vegas and Parkland and now Santa Fe, it's terrible. I have to keep memorizing new places. The only thing that I understand that Congress has been able to achieve, the House of Representatives, is they had a bill about banning bump stocks, and it got referred to committee. That's all they were able to accomplish. I agree with Brent on the fact that obviously money is a root source of this problem. I'm also on record to say that we need to cut off the legs of the NRA. It is money is at the root of this. There's no reason why they won't take any action other than the fact that they're taking money from the gun lobby. It's clearly obvious that any person with a third-grade education, in my opinion, it's just crazy. So I also want to make one quick comment about Santa Fe. So I think the news reports were that that particular person took the weapons out of the house. There's two things that family could have bought that would have saved those kids' lives. 2 gun locks. 2 gun locks, $20, all right? Most people, if they survive a suicide attempt, they'll tell you that they made that decision 20 minutes before they made to try to do that. So it's access to weapons that's part of the problem as well. I didn't, should teachers have guns? I don't trust Tom with a gun, so I'll say no. You're not packing now, are you?
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Tom Niermann.
All right. No, I'm not carrying a gun. As a teacher,
Should teachers be armed?
absolutely not. And all kidding aside, this is actually a deeply personal issue for me. Early in my career, as I've said before, I have had students of mine, the victims of gun violence. I had a gun brought into my classroom, and I remember early on people advocating, well, let's just arm teachers. And that is, without doubt, one of the stupidest solutions I have ever heard when it comes to solving this issue about guns in our communities. Now, let's be very clear here. What we are talking about is not the Second Amendment. We are talking about saving lives. And when it comes to saving lives, there cannot be any hesitation. There cannot be any lack of resolve. This is something that is incredibly important to all of us. All of us send our kids to schools, and right now, we have more children killed by gun violence than we have had servicemen killed in 2 active war zones. How is that possible? I have an F on my lapel pin. I received that the last time I was in Washington, D.C. from Congressman Niermann. He gave that to me. He said, this is the grade I received from the NRA. He said, when you get to Congress, I want you to earn that same grade. As a teacher, I have never advocated failure, but I'll tell you this, I will be extraordinarily happy to earn an F grade from the NRA.
Thank you.
I've got more to say about this, so talk to me when this is over.
Okay, I'm going to answer Tom's question. Why is this happening? 85% of Americans want gun violence legislation, and it's not happening. It's the same problem we have with immigration. It's the same problem we have with healthcare. It's the same problem we have with the environment. We have Washington lobbyists that are controlled by corporate America that are stopping it from happening. We all know how to fix the gun violence issue. The first thing we want to do is not arm teachers. The second thing we want to do is have a buyback that gets guns off the street, because the #1 cause of gun violence is too many guns. The second thing we want to do is treat it like anything else that's potentially dangerous. Everybody has to have a driver's license before they can drive a car. Why shouldn't you have to go through some background check and be licensed to own a gun? It just makes sense. But the corporate America does not want it to happen because it might hurt their profitability. Again, the war in America is not between Democrats and Republicans. It's against the corporations and the American citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If you could serve on any committee, what would you like to serve on and why? And we will start with #1, which is Sharice Davids.
Okay. Only because the jokes were happening earlier, I have to say this. I always bring the guns. So I would say, it's funny because I think that if you look at Representative Yoder, you can clearly see that he chooses his committees by the amount of power and money that he'll be able to bring into his campaigns because of the committees he's serving on. I'm particularly interested in serving on committees that I think that I will be able to help benefit this district by serving on. So infrastructure is one of those places, infrastructure and transportation, because of the time that I spent at the Department of Transportation learning about the various ways that transportation touches every single aspect of our lives and the way that it can turn what might not be an opportunity if we're not thinking about it into an opportunity if we're building our infrastructure in the appropriate ways and ways that are engaging communities and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the communities. So that's one of them, and then another one would be natural resources. I'm particularly concerned about the environment, and I'm also, as a person who thinks of the place that we're leaving this, we need to be good stewards of the earth, and we need to make sure that we're leaving for the future generations a place where they can breathe and drink water and thrive. So.
Brent Welder.
My wife and I are both labor lawyers representing union workers, and my mom spent some time as a school teacher. And the committee that I would greatly hope to be able to serve on would be the Education and the Workforce Committee. In fact, there is a subcommittee called HELP, and I think it's aptly named because it stands for Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions. The middle class and working families and poor people in this country are being taken advantage of every single day. They're being paid inadequate wages, they're not being given health insurance and adequate benefits, and they are not receiving pensions and retirement money that they did back-breaking work their entire life to earn. These are things that we can lift working families, we can lift the middle class, we can lift our communities, and it is something that I'm extremely passionate about and hope to be able to do when in Congress.
McCamon.
Thank you, Gary. If I am so lucky to win the nomination and then go on and win in November, I want to be, I would like to serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Information Technology Subcommittee. I'm going to take this a different direction here for a second. So, we've talked about a lot of issues here that are pretty scary. Guns, immigration. But one thing we don't ever talk about is the role of technology in our lives. We have online fraud, stolen identities, the Russian meddling in our elections. How many people in this room have Facebook accounts? Everybody does, right? I would say that most teenage kids know better about how Facebook works than most members of Congress, based upon the examination I saw of Mark Zuckerberg in front of that same committee. It was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment. I'm the only person on this, well actually, let me put it this way. With all due respect, I don't think we need more lawyers in Washington, D.C. I think we need people that understand the technology industry and the technology we use today that will shape our future in D.C. And I'm the only person on this stage that has that kind of experience. In fact, I'm only one of 4 people I know that's running as a freshman candidate that has that type of experience in the entire United States with a deep experience in the tech sector. And this is something we're going to need for now and for the very near and distant future, is technology. We have to get back our democracy, and it basically got stolen from us on Facebook by the Russians.
Tom Niermann.
The committee I would most like to serve on is the Education and Workforce Committee. And education, I think, is obvious enough. As a career teacher, I've got an awful lot to say about education policy, and I think that it is about time that we had teachers actually determining education policy in the United States. And I would work actively to make sure that we are developing policy that first and foremost guarantees equity in education. I am a firm believer that what our responsibility is as members of a democracy, if we are serious about creating good government, government has to be based on that idea that we are continually improving people's lives. And the Committee Education and Workforce would allow me to address issues of education that are so critically important, especially equity in education. And the workforce part of the committee is also tied into this notion of opportunity, because if we have communities that have good schools and we have communities where families are able to, where we've got jobs that are able to support families, then we have the recipe for creating opportunity for people in our communities. And I think that the Education and Workforce, or Education and Workplace Committee would be the best committee for me to serve this community.
Jay Sidie.
Okay, my wheelhouse, where I think I could have the most impact in Washington and for the people of the 3rd District of the United States, is on the Taxation and Economic Development Committees. Because when I look at what's happened to America over the last 20 years, what are the root causes of the decline of the middle class, the plight of the less fortunate people? It's the way we're collecting taxes. We're not collecting enough taxes to fund things that help education, help healthcare, help elderly. So without resources, there's nothing we can do about the other issues. So if we go back to collecting taxes the way we did in 1960, we could probably fuel a turnaround very quickly. If you look at, even go back to 1953, in 1953, corporate America paid 33% of all the taxes paid in America. Guess how much they're paying now? 9%. So all that tax burden has fallen on the American people. And on top of that, the very wealthy people were paying a much higher percentage of taxes. So without tax collection from the people that can afford to pay it, corporations are at record profits. There's no reason they're paying so little taxes. Without resources, we can work on healthcare, education, and infrastructure, the things that really stimulate the economy. But we have to start with resources, where they're going to come from. And then once we have the resources, then we can make it happen.
Sylvia Williams.
Obviously, I think I'd be the best fit on like the finance committee or anything that relates to banking. It's been interesting working in banking for 30 years, and you really see what laws are working and what laws need to be fixed. In 1977, they passed a law called the Community Reinvestment Act, and it was set up for lower to middle income communities to make sure that banks didn't discriminate and supported those communities that might be struggling. It has not been modernized or updated basically since then. And so basically someone with my background, and the banks currently have figured out how to get around the regulation, and they don't actually have to lend. So it needs to be modernized, and we need to put some teeth to it so that people in struggling communities can get home loans. You can get home equity loans. You should be able to have, we need small businesses to be able to start up and have access to lines of credit. These are the types of ways that we could like build communities, and we got to like revisit that law.
Okay. Now we'll give each of the candidates 90 seconds each for closing remarks. You ready? Okay, we'll start with candidate Brent Welder.
Unfortunately, Republicans, a lot of them nutcases in Washington, have been winning elections coast to coast in this country for the last 10 years by taking crazy, insane positions on issues, but then strongly making the case to the voters. And what we've found time and time again in this country is that a candidate like a Republican who is strong and wrong beats a candidate who is weak and right. It's time that we have Democrats in Congress who are strong and right and fight for the things we believe in. Over 10,000 people have either volunteered on our campaign or donated to our campaign. We're beating Kevin Yoder in the polls by the largest margin of any Democratic challenger in the entire country. And we're doing it by standing strong for our democratic principles. When I go to Congress, I am proud to tell you definitively right now, I will join my fellow Democrats in Congress who are overwhelmingly supporting important issues like Medicare for all and $15 minimum wage. I hope you will go to brentwelder.com to join our movement, to find out more about my candidacy, because together we can defeat Kevin Yoder, we can stop Donald Trump, and we can achieve amazing things for the people in this country who are struggling.
Thank you, Brent. Mike McCamon.
So, I want to just kind of go a little off sheet here. I've got some notes here, so it's not very rehearsed today, but I was thinking about it when I was driving around town, and I would make the observation that the future can look pretty scary. And I know what it's like to be afraid. When my father passed away when I was a kid, I could see the fear in my mom's eyes about how she was going to make ends meet and make sure her kids got a fair chance and an education. Today things do look pretty scary. We have a very dangerous president, in my opinion. We have a disconnected Representative McCamon Yoder. We've got gun violence, increasing cost of education, this reign of terror on immigration, all these things we've been talking about. But as I've already mentioned, I think there's some growing threats that we should be thinking about. Online fraud, the Russian meddling in our elections. And by the way, if you think office automation and offshoring is scary, let's start talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence and self-driving cars, okay? Make no mistake, if we give into this fear, we're just gonna enable the next Donald Trump. And we can't do that. We need to take back our country and our democracy. The greatness of America has never been a given, it's always been a choice. That's a choice you get to make when you go vote. And like I said, with all due respect, I don't think we need more lawyers. I think what we need is people that understand the issues that are going to shape our tomorrow, not our past. I hope that you'll consider me for voting. My name is Mike McCamon, MikeForKansas.com. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Candidate Tom Niermann.
Well, I think that the current class of professional politicians has strayed an awfully long ways from the ideal of a citizen legislator that I teach my students about and that I have taught my students about for the last 26 years. As a member of the middle class, as someone who knows what it's like to have the struggles of a middle class family, to worry about how to pay the bills from month to month, to worry about the opportunities for my children, I think that middle class voice is important in Washington, D.C. As a member of the middle class and as a teacher, as someone who works with young people every day, who hears about the concerns that young people have, about the world that they will inherit, I think it is important that we send to Washington people who understand those concerns that young people have. As a scholar of American history, I am convinced that there is more that unites us than divides us. And I am committed to the idea that government is best when it is working to improve the lives of the people in our communities. And you can rest assured that if you elect me to Congress, I will work tirelessly in that effort to continually improve people's lives. And it is my sincerest hope that as this campaign continues, that I earn your support in this fight to reclaim our democracy and to make sure that government is a government that works for us.
Thank you. Sidie.
Okay, I'm going to pretend like I'm sitting out there, and what I'd want to hear from me is two things you should know about anybody you're thinking about voting for. Why are they running? And can they win? That's important. We can talk about the issues until the cows come home. But if Yoder wins, it doesn't make any difference. So the strategy we have to have as a party is to figure out how to beat Yoder. How do we do that? And when I got in the race in 2016, I got in knowing that I had a very small chance of winning. And my wife said, why are we doing it? And I said, because to win, you have to run twice to beat an incumbent. You look back over all the congressional races over the last 30 years, if you're a first-time candidate running against an incumbent, you have a 97% chance of losing because the incumbent has name recognition, more money, and more political infrastructure. It's a big hurdle. It's David against Goliath when you're a brand new first-time candidate trying to take out an incumbent. But if you come back and run a second time, your odds of winning go way up. And a good example of that is Barack Obama. The first time he ran for Congress, he was a well-known Harvard constitutional law professor that did community service, ran against a no-name Republican, and lost. So what did he do? He came back and ran a second time, and he won. And in 2016, Obama heard about me, endorsed me, called up and said, would my endorsement help your campaign? And my team said, it sure would. He goes, you got it. So I was endorsed by Barack Obama because he had faith in me. So I think you can too. Thank you.
Sylvia Williams.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. Also, it's been a lot of heavy topics as well, which politics is, but I do want to say we have a good shot at flipping the House, and I hope everyone leaves somewhat hopeful that we're going to get this done. Second, I do have a couple of exciting announcements. I'm excited to announce that Kelly Coltula has agreed to be my campaign manager. And Kelly is a former Kansas State senator, and she was actually the first woman senator from Wyandotte County. She ran for this seat in 2014 against Kevin Yoder, so her experience is going to be extremely valuable to our race. I would also like to announce the endorsement of Joan Wagnon. Joan is a former Kansas State representative. She's also the former Secretary of Revenue and the former mayor of Topeka. She was actually the city's first female mayor. More recently, she was the chair of the Kansas Democratic Party and is known for rebuilding the party after 2010. So with the support of these Kansas pioneering women, we're going to be tough and move forward and win this race. We're prepared to take on Kevin Yoder in November, and you can count on us to turn the district blue.
All right. And last but not least, Sharice Davids.
It's already on. Excuse me. So I'll start off by saying, Mike, I forgive you for not wanting more lawyers in Congress. I would probably hold the same view, except that the reason that I went to law school was because there are not that many Native people who go to law school. And I think that part of what I have done with my life is try to make sure that I'm doing things that will make it easier and better and more likely that we will have more successful Native people, women, people from different backgrounds than kind of the homogenous leadership that I was talking about earlier. And so, with all due respect, I believe that having a lawyer like myself in Congress would be very beneficial. And then the second thing I would like to say is that it was not that long ago that a person like me wasn't even considered a citizen of this country, although my people were here first. In 2024, we'll have the 100-year anniversary of Native people being recognized as citizens in this country. And when we talk about the why someone runs, it's because, I said this earlier, I'm not going to be the voice for somebody else, but I don't need or want other people to step up and say that they're going to be the voice for me, or a community that I'm part of, or someone else's community. Because what we need is leaders who are gonna listen, not leaders who are gonna come in and say, I know what's best for you. And that is what has happened for too long, particularly with federal leadership and Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharice. This ends my last part. I just want to thank Kansas 03 for allowing me this opportunity to moderate, and I wish all the candidates the very best.
I get to ask one question, a quick one. If you don't win the primary, do you pledge to give your full support to the primary winner? We start with Mike.
Yes.
Okay, Tom,
Of course.
Jay,
Of course.
Sylvia,
Of course.
Sharice,
Absolutely.
and Brent.
I will support any Democrat that runs an issue-based clean campaign, which I think we all have pledged to do, so.
Okay,
There we
thank
go.
you. So, thanks very much to Crystal and Gary, and a huge thanks to the candidates for making so much of a personal sacrifice of your time to run for public office. We have a couple more announcements, don't leave yet. So be sure to return here for the Democratic Governor Candidate Forum on Saturday, June 16th at 2 p.m. It's hosted by the KCKCC College Democrats and the Wyandotte County Democratic Party. It's going to be really important who we pick for the next governor, right? Okay. So now, if you need to register to vote or update your registration, your party affiliation, your address, you can do it online at ksvotes.org, or we've got people in the back at the voter registration area who will be happy to help you with that. So I'm going to make a plug. And one of the best ways to help us get more people to vote is to sign up to be a Democratic Precinct Committee man or woman. A precinct leader's duty is to contact all the Democrats in your neighborhood, let them know about the candidates in the elections, and make sure that they vote. If you want to run for a precinct leader, we have two notaries over here, over at the Wyandotte County Democratic Party table, who are happy to help you apply for either Wyandotte or Johnson County. And we got 3 notaries, I think. Great. And so now you've had a chance to hear what all the candidates have to say. Please mark your ballots And if you need a ballot, we can hand them out, put up your hand, or if you need a pen. So there are several who need them. And so we want you to rank the candidates 1 through 6 for both questions. And then be sure and place your ballot in, we've got blue containers, of course blue, right? And either side, or you can just give it to me if you want. And we'll post the results on the Swing Left website and Facebook page by Sunday. Want to make sure you get out there and vote for the August 7th primary and in the November 6th general election. And if you want one of these great t-shirts from my models, the Swing Left t-shirts, deodorize or sew over Yoder in the back. We've got them at the Swing Left table. They're $15 each and cash only. The profits do go to the Swing Left District Fund, which goes to the primary winners campaign. So now you've got until 8:30, or a little longer, to enjoy some cookies and water in the back and visit with the candidates and the organizations. Thanks all of you for coming.